Now, in a previous video, I talked about how we could factor trinomials using kind of a guess and check method. And I wanted to talk about the actual method you could use here to remove guessing and checking from it. But I just want to point out, you can go watch that previous video about guessing and checking. There are a lot of times where that is the way I would do it. That's just easy. But there is a method, often referred to as the AC method, which is a nice algorithm to get your factors. Now, I put a couple of things on this screen already. AC method refers to the kind of common terms that we use for the coefficients when we have a trinomial, ax squared bx plus c, where a is the coefficient in front of x squared, so like in this example it's 2. B is the coefficient on x, so in this example it's 7. And c is the y-intercept, the one that doesn't have an x, so in this example 3. Now I also wrote an example of what we started with, which was distributing. You know, if we had something multiplied by something else, both in parentheses, these binomials, we took the 2x and multiplied that in. I put that in red. We took the 1 and multiplied that in. I put that in blue. And then I actually distributed each thing and combined my like terms. Now, why I wrote that down is the AC method is a kind of tactical way of working exactly backwards. We basically want to take our trinomial, split the middle term into the two terms that would have been combined, and then we want to factor out the piece that goes in front. And then we want to factor the x plus 3 out. So it is the exact opposite of that distribution process. Okay, so let's do an example. Okay, so in this one, again, I just want to point out that you could kind of list the possibilities. Like, if you're going to create binomials, that 2x and x are the two ways I could get 2x squared. But this is a little trickier because, of course, 1 and 9 would multiply to 9, and 3 and 3. So you might have to do some playing with the actual order, and where things fall in your binomials. But let's look at this other method. Now, the AC method says we are looking for two numbers that multiply together to be A times C. I'm going to just make a little note. So normally, when we didn't have a coefficient in front of x squared, if you could ignore it, we just said, well, what numbers multiply to this? But now we have to include that 2. And actually, if you think about when there was no coefficient written here, it was 1. This method works for everything because if the coefficient was 1, 1 times c would be c. So A times c, and again, using this kind of general way of writing trinomials, A is 2, C is 9, so we're looking for two things that multiply to 2 times 9, or 18. And they still have to add up to the middle. That's no different. So if you start listing, 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 6, I think pretty clear that it's going to be 1 and 18 are the ones that we use. 1, 18. So as I said, our goal is to split this term. So we don't change anything in the A part and the C part, but we split this to be 1x and 18x. Kind of an acknowledgement that must have been when that first distribution happened, before we combined like terms, this must have been what it looked like. Now, we group. By the way, the order of 1x and 18x does not matter. You would end up with the same thing if you swap these two, okay? Now, what can we factor out of the first parentheses, that first group of 2? I could factor an x out, and I'd be left with 2x plus 1. And then do the same thing to the second pair of parentheses. What can I factor out? Well, a 9 could come out of, 9 could come out of both. And you'll notice that these factors are the same. That has to be true. If it isn't, you made a mistake. I am now going to factor the 2x plus 1 out, since both terms had a 2x plus 1. And then I just figure what was left over. The x plus 9 was left over. So that is my other factor. And that's the AC method. So no guessing and checking. We're able to just kind of come through this with breaking it apart. Again, guessing and checking will work. You know, you can use educated guessing to say, you know, it had to be a 2x and an x, because that's the way you got 2x squared. And then, again, the difficult part was kind of filling that in when we had to, you know, kind of use our logic and our number skills. But let's do another one. All right, so 3x squared minus 20x plus 25. And again, if you just went to kind of the guess and check method here and said, well, I know that it's going to be 3x and x, because that's the only way to get 3x squared. And then, you know, I'm going to have to do something here. It'll probably either be a 5 and a 5 or a 25 and a 1. And I can put those things, because remember, they have to multiply. The numbers that go here have to multiply together to be 25. You can reason this through, but let's do it with this AC method, okay? So we're going to look for two numbers that multiply. Remember, it's A times C, so in our case, 3 times 25 is 75. And we want those two numbers to add together to be negative 20. So I would always focus on the 75, you know, 1 times 75, 3 times 25, 5 times 15. I think that's how we're going to get there, is 5 and 15, right? Because they're both going to be negative in order to get that negative 20. So if we had negative 5 and negative 15, that would multiply to be a positive 75 and add together to be negative 20. So remember, our first term and our last term don't change at all. All we just did was split the negative 20 to be minus 5x minus 15x. Again, the order doesn't matter there. And then we group. I'm going to just make this a negative 15, like that. Okay, what can I factor out of the first parentheses? Well, just an x. And out of the next one, 15 and 25 are both divisible by 5. And I'm actually going to pull out a negative 5 so that it's positive in there. Yeah. And remember, we're trying to make a match here in the parentheses. You see we did. Both terms now have a 3x minus 5, so I can factor that out. So I'm left with 3x minus 5. That factors, and then what's left over after I factor is x minus 5. So that is my other factor. So again, I like this method because, you know, guessing and checking is fine, but it is nice to have an actual method. And it depends on the type of problem, which one is actually faster. But this is a pretty slick way. Just remember, we're looking for the two numbers that multiply together to be, we just take our coefficient of x squared and our y-intercept, find the product, and still adds to the middle. And what we're trying to do is break that middle term into kind of exactly opposite. You know, when we distributed, we often had 4 terms and we combined the middle terms and we basically uncombined them. And then we figured out, well, what could we factor out of each pair? Remember, the order in the middle here doesn't matter. Once we factored out, we should have had the same thing in parentheses because in this case, they both had a 3x minus 5. I could factor that out and it left me with x minus 5. If this video helped you, please like and subscribe for more math help.